focus more on the bookstore or on your beliefs? about
Interviewing
your
Joe and
UFOs
Chris. Interviewing Joe and Chris,
And what
absolutely.
they have to say?
Yeah. Yeah, she's got like 6 pages of notes.
Good.
She was curious herself. Yeah. The Indie Press. I made the Albuquerque Indie Press too. One of their guys was in here. And they just got a little copy of the logo under what in the world is they doing Roswell. It starts off something about there's this odd little coffee shop in Roswell.
Did that appear in the alibi by chance?
Joe, where's that
Yes.
Albuquerque paper?
Yes.
I'd
The
love to
alibi.
see it. I'd love to
Yeah.
see it. They stopped in here during the test.
I remember 1 or 2 people saying they were from Albuquerque. One guy picked up a lot of stuff and asked me, "Do you have any tracings?" And I said, "I would after this conference." Well, if you go when you're ready. Okay. Well, tell me. Okay.
It's rolling. It's the atmosphere.
How long is that? I'm doing some, that's probably not fresh. How's it taste? Not fresh, okay. Or we church in Nashville, we had an 8:30 and an 11 o'clock service, and it was always a joke that the 8:30 service was the warm up. It's kind of like tonight is. I'll bring you a copy of this. Black?
No.
No, you like cream. Sure. Thanks for coming. I'm Malone. I do live here, and I'm the author of one book that's up there. And since it's here and it's available to check out if you're local, I won't do much talking. Joe Jordan, who's an abduction researcher, and Chris Ward, who's a pastor in Florida, will do 2 quick talks, about an hour each. That's okay with you guys? Just keep it roughly at that. But the purpose of the place is biblical perspectives on UFOs. We do abductee counseling and what I call community development as well. And really, I'm just going to let Joe take over. He's got a lot more experience speaking than I do. I always say I'm a more convincing writer than I am a speaker, so I'll get out of the way and let a couple guys that know what they're doing get started. Joe Jordan.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. Like I said, I'm going to keep this casual. This is a coffee house. It's not a big conference. My name is Joe Jordan. I'm a state section director for the Mutual UFO Network. What that means is, if you're not familiar with MUFON, MUFON is the largest research organization in the world today that's still doing UFO abduction and sighting research. Abduction is just starting with them. They do some, but not extensive, which has caused me to go on and do a lot of the research outside of MUFON's work itself. MUFON consists of over 5,000 members worldwide. They look at this phenomenon from the scientific level perspective to find out what this phenomenon is, and they've been in existence since 1969. The international director has been Walt Andrus, who has just resigned since 1970, and John Schuessler has taken over. The way that the organization is set up is there's an international director, there's a Eastern and Western U.S. director, there are international country directors, and then in the U.S. it's broken down to state directors and state section directors, and which I am a state section director. I'm a state section director for Brevard County, Florida, which is the county that the Kennedy Space Center is located in. My job as a state section director is to organize an investigative team for MUFON in my county. And I do that by MUFON training standards to bring investigators up to levels so they can do investigations along with myself. And over the past years, I've been working with MUFON since '92, and over the past years in the county, in the area of Central Florida that I live in, we have done extensive sighting reports. Even though we're located right there next to the Kennedy Space Center, there are investigations going on in the area around the Space Center, right adjacent to the Space Center. So even though they talk about high security, there's still something going on in the skies around there. We try to follow up on these reports. A lot of reports come from just your basic people around that live around the area, and what's really neat is to talk to the people that have been working there 30, 40 years, and some of them retired now, and about the experiences that they've had in the general vicinity of the Space Center. Some are quite interesting. When I first started out with the Mutual UFO Network, I got into it because of a interest I had come across dealing in UFOs. And when I found out about MUFON, I joined MUFON because I wanted to know more about the phenomenon and I wanted to find answers to it. And MUFON gave me that avenue to do that. I started out as a field investigator trainee working under a fellow that I knew out of Orlando, Florida, who had been a state section director for Orange County in Central Florida. And he worked me up to the level of field investigator. And then at that point, he introduced me to the state director up in Gulf Breeze, Florida. And together we did some talking and found that there was no organization at all set up in my county, and I was offered the county of Brevard. And that started my reign into investigations. I set up the investigators under me. We had monthly meetings open to the public where we discussed the cases that we had. And it gave people an opportunity to come in and share their experiences and also to explore more of the phenomenon itself. We worked sighting investigations for about 4 years. And the impression we got doing these investigations was that we were chasing our tail. Because we were doing sighting investigation after sighting investigation. They were all very elusive. There was nothing ever tangible to grasp onto for any kind of evidence in any way. It was just report after report. And studying the phenomenon itself, which has been in existence for 50 years or better, we felt that we weren't doing any better than the rest of the people had done throughout the past 50 years. But we were hungry to get an answer to what was going on. So we put our heads together and we felt we needed another plan of attack to get to the truth. And what we came up with is we felt that we needed to get to the front line of what was going on. And we felt that there were people on the front line, and these people were called contactees or abductees. Because these people claimed that they had been in the presence of the entities or in contact with the entities. So we focused our research working in the abduction realm. And locally, we had our handful of abduction research, of abductees, experiencers to deal with. And we started doing the interviews with them, going through the questioning with them, and getting their past history and on their experiences and the activity that they dealt with in the UFO realm. We were doing abduction research for a couple years when we came across one particular interesting case. And this case was something that was totally out of the ordinary, which what we had dealt with so far. This particular case that had come to us was a standard in the sense that it met all the criteria of being an abduction experience. So we knew that we were dealing with something that we felt was true to the abduction phenomenon, except that this person claimed that he had stopped his experience. Well, that's something we had never heard of. Because when I started into the abduction research, I had to start someplace, and the place to start was with the other people's work. The other researchers that had been in this phenomenon for, 10, 15, 20 years. And I had to go look at their case histories and the work that they had done. So I had a place to start with and something to compare the cases that I was dealing with by. But nowhere in their work had I seen anything that said that abductions could be stopped. This was something that was brand new, that I'd never seen before, and I was questioning it myself. The next thing I had to do was find out whether this case was a real case or it was just something that was needed to be put away. I got phone numbers to the top abduction researchers in the country, and I started calling them. And I wanted to ask them about this particular case. And when I talked to them, I told them, I said, I had a case here that seemed to be a little out of the ordinary. And I shared the case with them. And then something interesting happened. At that point, these people asked to go off the record. And I said, look, I don't mind going off the record. I said, I'm just looking for some answers here for this particular case that I have. You know, is this something out of the ordinary? Is it something that I need to put away because it's not fitting the normal pattern? Or is this something you guys have come across? Well, off the record, they admitted that they had cases like this also. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why haven't I read about it? Why haven't we heard about it? And usually the answer I got to that was, we weren't really sure what we were dealing with here, or we didn't know how to handle it. And then that was usually followed by, we were afraid to go there because of hurting our credibility in the realm. And I'll explain in a little bit why that would hurt their credibility. When I realized that these guys had cases just like the one that I had, I knew that there were more out there. That answered the question that what I had was real, even though it was unusual, but I had something that nobody else had written about and nobody else wanted to deal with. But I also knew there were more. And the next step that I had to do was, let's go find some more. Let's verify that this is something that's not out of the ordinary, but just not talked about. And I did find more cases. And what I found in the past 4 years is upwards to close to 100 cases where these people, these abductees, now that they have a place to come to share their experience with and not be ridiculed for it, and somebody to actually talk to them about it, is that I have these common cases where they've all stopped their experience in the same manner. And we've recently gone to a new term, and the actual word that we're using now is terminate their experiences. Because you can stop your experience. We know that now from other researchers that have come forward and started looking at this subject. There seems to be evidence that experiences can be stopped in other manners beside the one that I found. But to terminate the experience, to absolutely stop it for good, seems to be only found in this one particular method. And the method that we have come across, I'll share with you from my first experiencer that I came across out of the transcript of the interview we did with him to give you an idea of what's happening here. What follows is a case of Bill D. Bill's experience took place in Christmas, Florida in 1976. His abduction started out typically late at night in bed. Earlier in the evening, he saw some anomalous lights through his living room window over a forest north of his house. He assumed it was a police helicopter searching for drug runners or something. Whatever it was, it agitated his dogs for several hours thereafter. He eventually went to bed. He was lying in bed, kept awake by the barking dogs, when paralysis set in. He was unable to cry out. He could see nothing but a whitish gray, like a mist or a fog. Although he sensed someone or something was in his room, his wife didn't awaken. The next thing he knew, he was being levitated above his bed. He then had the sensation he was being suspended by what felt like a pole inserted into his rectum. By this time, he was alive with terror, but he couldn't scream. Here's where the story becomes very interesting. The following is an excerpt taken directly from the transcript of Mr. D's interview. I thought I was having a satanic experience. that the devil had gotten a hold of me and had shoved a pole up my rectum and was holding me up in the air. So helpless, I couldn't do anything. I said, Jesus, Jesus, help me, or Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. When I did, there was a feeling or a sound or something that either my words that I had thought or the words that I had tried to say or whatever had hurt whatever was holding me up in the air on this pole. And I felt like it was withdrawn. And I fell. I hit the bed because it wasn't like I was thrown back in bed. I really can't tell, but when I did, my wife woke up and asked me why I was jumping on the bed. The man stopped his experience, but he stopped it by calling out in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. This was not published anywhere. And I have cases upon cases upon cases where this same termination of the experience is done in the same manner. When I found this, when I was doing the work in the research realm, I came at this work as a secular, scientific, investigative researcher. I wasn't looking at this with any Christian agenda or biblical agenda. Matter of fact, I didn't think it belonged in the realm, the two of them together. But I had to start looking at this connection. I felt that this is the way these people have stopped this experience, using this name and that authority, and there must be some kind of biblical connection to what's going on. I also had the feeling that possibly this was not even extraterrestrial. Because when you look at the way the abduction experience happens, it's more paranormal than physical. And I'd like to read to you some writing from Dr. Carla Turner, just to give you a better background on the abduction experience. The late Dr. Carla Turner, who was an experiencer and an abduction researcher herself, came to some interesting conclusions based upon her personal experience and research of other experiencers. And this is taken from Aliens, Friends or Foes by Dr. Carla Turner. Aliens can alter our perceptions of our surroundings. Aliens can control what we see. They can appear to us in any number of guises and shapes. Aliens can be present with us in an invisible state and can make themselves only partially visible. Abductees receive marks on their bodies other than the well-known scoop marks and straight-line scars. These other marks include single punctures, multiple punctures, large bruises, 3- and 4-finger claw marks, and triangles of every possible sort. Female abductees often suffer serious gynecological problems after their alien encounters, and sometimes these problems lead to cysts, tumors, cancer of the breast and uterus, and to hysterectomies. A surprising number of abductees suffer from serious illnesses they didn't have before their encounters. These have led to surgery, debilitation, and even death from causes that doctors can't identify. Abductees often encounter more than one sort of alien during an experience, not just the typical grays. Every possible combination of gray, reptoid, insectoid, blonde have been seen during these single abductions aboard the same craft or in the same facility. Abductees report being scoffed at, jeered at, threatened by their alien captors. Painful genital and anal probes are performed. Unknown fluids are injected into some abductees. Abductee cases report being taken to underground facilities where they see grotesque hybrid creatures, nurseries of hybrid humanoid fetuses and vats of colored liquid filled with parts of human bodies. Abductees report seeing other humans in these facilities being drained of blood, being mutilated, flayed, and dismembered and stacked like lifeless cords of wood. Some abductees have even been threatened that they too will end up in this condition if they don't cooperate with their alien captors. Aliens come into homes and temporarily remove young children, leaving their distraught parents paralyzed and helpless. In cases where a parent has been able to protest, the aliens insist that children belong to us. Aliens have forced their human abductees to have sexual intercourse with aliens and even other abductees, while groups of aliens observe these performances. In such encounters, the aliens have sometimes disguised themselves in order to gain the cooperation of the abductee, appearing in such forms as Jesus, the Pope, certain celebrities, and even the dead spouses of the abductees. Aliens perform extremely painful experiments or procedures on abductees, saying that these acts are necessary but give no explanation why. Painful genital and anal probes are performed on children as well as adults. Aliens make predictions of an imminent period of global chaos and destruction. They say that a certain number of humans will be rescued from the planet in order to continue the species, either on another planet or back on Earth after the destruction is over. Many abductees report they don't believe they're alien captors and foresee instead a much more sinister use of the rescued humans. In every instance from this list, there are multiple reports from unrelated cases confirming that such bizarre details are not the product of a single deranged mind. These details are convincing evidence that, contrary to the claims of many UFO researchers, the abduction experience isn't limited to uniform pattern of events. This phenomenon simply cannot be explained in terms of crossbreeding experiments or scientific research into human physiology. Before we allow ourselves to believe in the benevolence of alien interaction, we should ask, do enlightened beings need to use the cover of night to perform good deeds? Do they need to paralyze us and render us helpless to resist? Do angels need to steal our fetuses? Do they need to manipulate our children's genitals and probe our rectums? Are fear, pain, and deception consistent with high spiritual motives? This researcher that wrote this is a total secular investigative researcher. She died a few years ago of cancer. From the people that I have met over the past couple of years that had a chance to talk to her before she passed on, I feel that she was very, very close to the truth, because she also had come across these particular cases. She worked with a lady by the last name of Bartholomew, that in one of the writings I saw, her case histories, there was actually, they had it right in there, a case history where a woman had called out for these beings to stop in the name and authority of Jesus Christ, and they stopped. And these, they didn't even recognize it. That one went right over their heads, as did my first case. My first case that I came across, where this person had told myself and my partner, Wes Clark, who has done the writings here for me, we both sat there and listened to that experiencer tell us that he had stopped his experience. We didn't hear him, not one bit. That took 6 months before we actually realized that we had that case on record. And it was an interesting how all that worked out. Like I said, I started out as in this research as a secular investigative researcher. Through the work that I've done, I now can no longer say I'm a secular investigative researcher. I saw the power and authority that was being used here. And I wanted that same power and authority, especially in the realm that I was dealing with, especially if I was going to be helping these other people. So 4 years ago, after dealing with 5 years in the UFO realm, 6 years in the New Age realm, I made a profession of Christ. I am now a Christian, and I'm still pursuing this realm. Because a few of the things that I have found is most of these cases where the people came to me and said, I terminated this experience. When I started questioning them and questioning their background, I found out that most of the time, these people were professing Christians. Why they went into this particular area is a good question. Why the experiences was a good question. I needed to find answers to that. Because if the authority was in these people as believers, how did this experience happen to them? And after questioning them, what I have found in the research, by going through a number of the cases that I've looked at and trying to put it together, it happens one of 3 ways. If it's an adult coming and saying that they're having these experiences, it's one of 2 ways. They either ask for it knowingly or they ask for it unknowingly. In other words, they open the door for this experience to happen. And I found that same evidence looking at case after case after case. What puzzled me was when I had cases come to me and said that I've had experiences since I was a child. Well, that one had me puzzled for a while, because as a brand new Christian, I wasn't well versed in Scripture. And I had to have help. A lot of it came from my partner, Wes Clark, who had taken the chore of actually delving into Scripture and trying to learn as much as possible so that we could put this work together. And we found an answer to it. And it's actually based in Scripture. The other part where they said that it had happened as children, because I don't believe that a 4 or 5-year-old child has the knowledge of this phenomenon to open the door into this phenomenon, to ask for it, or even not knowingly ask for it. What I found working with these experiencers and start asking the right questions is, what was your family like? What was home life like? What were your parents into? What I found was that the parents opened the door. And there's a scripture that talks about that. And can you, Chris, do you know which one that is right off?
Yeah, it says that I will visit the sins of the father with the ring.
And also being the cover of the family.
Well, there's one in like deliverance now.
The one where, I can't quote them exactly, I'm not that good yet, but the one that's referring to this is to where the husband is the head of the household and the unbelieving wife sanctified by the believing father, believing husband, and the children are also covered. Okay, what I found, you know where that's found?
Yeah.
We'll look these up this week. If you guys got questions, stop me as I go, because we made a long trip and I'd like to answer as many as possible. Like I said, this is casual.
Also, the Acts 16:32 says, "Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved, and so shall your household." There's a special covenant for believers for their spouses.
Okay, so that right there was what answered that question, is how could the children be opened up to this phenomenon? And my case histories backed it up, because I found that the parents were into all sorts of different things. A lot of them were into a lot of occult, or even just other avenues where they didn't have a protection over their own home. And that's something that I hope that I can get across, that this phenomenon is actually an open door phenomenon. And what I feel is a danger in this field is that through the media, our movies, our TVs, our videotapes, the books that the media is putting out, that they're pushing this phenomenon as a fad. Well, the danger in this fad is that some people want to know a little more than just the fad part of it. It may be cool to wear an alien shirt. Chris, go ahead.
And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, he is willing to live with her, let her not force him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is also sanctified by a believing husband. Otherwise, your children will be unclean, but now they're holy.
Where?
That's in 1 Corinthians 7, and that's 13 and 14.
The video, the 10th commandment, section 20, it says the same thing, visit the sins of the fathers.
Right. And that's another area, the sins of the fathers they're talking about here. That's another area of the research that we just recently started looking at, is being new in the Christian realm. I'm still learning this as I go along, how this stacks up biblically. What is referred to as a generational curse or generational sins that are passed down from family to family, family generation to generation. And we're seeing that evident in the abduction realm. That, matter of fact, we came across one just recently, a guy had come across, where a woman was relaying her abduction experience stories to Guy. And Guy said that she had talked about it being generational there. And we see this in a lot of the cases where the abduction phenomenon seems to be fairly new over the past few years in getting it out to the media. Because back in the 40s and 50s, when we first started hearing about UFOs, the abduction phenomenon didn't exist. But in a way it did, Because when I look at these case histories, if I've got a 45, 50-year-old woman that says she's been an experiencer all her life, and then she says she's relaying stories that maybe mother or grandmother even had, well, now you're telling me that these abductions